Greetings, I am your instructor for today. I'm Michelangelo Maglake, a registered psychometrician, and we will talk about an introduction to psychology, what psychology is all about. So how would we define psychology and identify the nature of psychology? First, psychology is the science of human behavior. It is concerned with what people do, how they do it, and why they do it. It investigates problems such as individual differences in intelligence and personality, acquisition of knowledge and learning, forgetting, group behavior, maintenance of sound mental health, frustrations and conflicts, and the diagnosis and treatment of behavior disorders. It answers mostly some of the typical questions we ask about ourselves and other people like. So for example is, why are you taller than me? Or why is she afraid of her mother? How can we overcome our own fear? So why is the span of attention of a child is shorter than an adolescent? A lot of these questions, we try to answer it here in psychology. Now, what makes the study of psychology scientific? It involves observation, collection, and classification of data, testing hypotheses through experiments, and establishing general laws or conclusions. A great deal of emphasis has been placed on collecting facts, since science can be no better than the facts upon which it is based. As a study of behavior, psychology involves overt or extrinsic behaviors and covert or intrinsic behaviors. Overt or extrinsic behaviors are those observed by other people, while covert or intrinsic behaviors are those known only to the persons experiencing them. Laughing, walking, eating, crying, and singing are samples of overt behavior. Increased pulse rate, stomach contraction when hungry, secretion of adrenaline during emotional stress, and beating of the heart are just examples of covert behaviors. Let's tackle about the historical development of psychology. It's just a brief discussion about the historical development of psychology. So psychology was considered before as a branch of philosophy. It came from the two Greek words, psyche meaning mind and logo meaning study. So to the philosopher, psychology was simply the study of the mind. Well, in history of the development of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt thought that psychology can be considered a science if it will deal more on experimental research than specific speculation or reflection. He then put up the world's first laboratory for the experimental investigation of psychological problems in the University of Leipzig in 1879. He and his students focused their study on consciousness, which is awareness of oneself and the world about him. They used introspection as their principal method, where introspection is looking into or examination of one's thought or feeling. The experimenter made various changes in the stimuli, and the subject described his own experiences. And according to the investigators, consciousness could be broken down into small parts or pieces of experiences, known as sensations, images, and feelings, which were the elements of the mind. Those who studied consciousness in this way were called structuralists because they tried to describe the contents or structure of the mind. And the scope of psychology broadened when different schools of thought introduced their beliefs and different methods of study. As what you have heard, there are different schools of psychology. So, one school of psychology is structuralism, wherein the Wundt and Titchener, they are one of the psychologists who believe in structuralism. The leaders of these schools are Wundt and Titchener. It deals with the study of the elements which form the structure of the mind. And introspection is the method used by the structuralists. We also have this functionalism. This was developed at the University of Chicago under the leadership of John Dewey and James Angel. At the Harvard University under William James, they became involved in studying the functions of consciousness rather than the structure of the mind. The functionalists believe that consciousness aids in the learning process. Their study broadened as they dealt with intelligence, personality, and many more practical problems of education. And they stress the study of the learning process because learning is a means of man's adjustment to his environment. We also have this Gestalt psychology, where a group of German psychologists led by Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kafka introduced this school. The Gestaltists, as they called themselves, analyzed experience by configuration as a whole or pattern. They emphasized the importance of wholeness in the process of learning. To them, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They also emphasize the importance of form in perception and believe that shapes and forms need to be described by the organization of the entire perceptual field. We also have this another school, behaviorism, and the leader of the behaviorists is John B. Watson. He's a professor of psychology at Johns Hopkins University. Behaviorists were dissatisfied with introspective approaches of the introspection of the structuralists, and they believe that the concern of psychology should be behaviors which are observable and not conscious experience, which is subjective and known only to the person involved. And Watson explained behavior in terms of the famous stimulus and response. Another school in psychology is the psychoanalysis, where, of course, we know this, we know everyone who was the father of psychology. He is a Viennese physician from Venice. He's Dr. Sigmund Freud. He developed the theory known as psychoanalysis to explain physical, nervous, and emotional disorders with organic explanations. Well, Freud became interested on the subconscious and its effect on the conscious mind. Desires and experiences we are no longer aware of are buried in our subconscious. Unresolved conflicts during childhood give rise to psychological difficulties. And according to Freud, when the wishes of the unconscious mind and the activities of the conscious mind are in conflict, abnormal behavior results. So he stressed also that sexual desires are very strong forces. Humanism, however, this school believes that every person has an inherent desire for what is good. Criminality and delinquency are caused by an environment which is unhealthy and inadequate for proper development of an individual. Contrary to the behaviorists, humanists believe that each person is destined to be good. Growth is internal and the environment only acts as a background. And there are also these cognitive psychologists. Well, they believe this is a blend of humanism and behaviorism, giving special attention on thought processes, reasoning, and problem solving. The cognitive psychologists work towards the understanding of the basic method of operation of the human brain. Well, for them, man's capability of thinking enables him to compare past and present experiences and then form judgment based on the same. Now we will move forward to discussing the objectives of psychology or objectives of studying psychology. The study of psychology is useful to all students irrespective of the course they take or the profession they choose. Teaching medicine, nursing, engineering, business, architecture, or computer science. All people behave or react to the stimuli they are exposed to in the environment. However, reactions to the same stimuli differ from one another depending upon certain factors that affect them. Psychology helps one understand himself and other people better. It makes him realize why people differ from one another. It teaches us to understand, to adjust to people and to our environment. It introduces us to important concepts on vital processes like learning, motivation, sensation, perception, and emotion. Furthermore, it aids us to maintain a wholesome, healthy, and well-rounded personality. And students of psychology should be aware of the different methods employed in science before reaching any conclusion or generalization about the human behavior. They become more scientific in explaining the causes of behavior. And in psychology, in order to understand behavior and personality, we need to conduct certain methods or scientific methods of research. So there are few scientific methods of research and let's discuss them. So the first method is the observational method. So this method is often used as a preliminary to the more exact methods where observations are made of the same subjects over an extended period of time. The method becomes a special case of the more general observational method and is sometimes called a longitudinal method or longitudinal study. Such studies are extremely costly and time-consuming because it takes a very long time. And this is usually replaced by a compromise method called the cross-sectional method wherein different subjects are observed to study their differences. And we also have this natural observation under the observational method. It involves observation in its natural setting. The investigator enters the subject's world without any hindrance as possible. He records what he sees without obstruction or manipulation. The investigator can observe accurately when the subject is unaware of the investigation. The method's value is in showing behaviors that would not ordinarily be expressed if the organism is aware of being observed. One-way mirrors, hidden microphones, binoculars, and blinds are devices sometimes intended to obtain observation from natural investigations. However, there are limitations to naturalistic observation. Some behaviors such as fantasy and dreams are not open to this type of observation. Sometimes it is unethical or illegal to apply this method as the installation of one-way mirrors in bathrooms or bedrooms. Privacy, confidentiality, and psychologists fail to obtain first-hand information when unpredictable behaviors occur. Definite conditions about cause and effect relationship usually require laboratory control to test several possibilities one at a time. And next, we also have this case study method. From the word itself, it's a case. It's like a life story or life history. In numerous cases, information is obtained by analyzing the life history of the people who have some outstanding characteristics. And case study methods help expose the factors that shape the nature of an individual. This is specifically true in such unusual conditions like mental disorders, crimes, delinquencies, and psychosomatic disorders. Conclusions from case history studies are usually considered tentative. There must be confirmed by experimentation and statistical analysis. This method first used extensively by our father of psychology, Sigmund Freud, and it involves gathering up extensive information about one person. His recollections of the childhood and youth, his goals, values, and ideals, his fears and anxieties, his fantasies and dreams. From such detailed biographies came theories and hypotheses concerning the contributions of early experiences to the adult personality, or concerning the relationship between fantasy and overt behavior. We also have this survey method, or the polls, and using the questionnaires. So this method acquires direct information on behavior through questionnaires, opinion polls, census, and ratings. Survey users should devise ways of eliminating problems that they may meet in eliciting responses from subjects. And some subjects are not honest simply because they want to please them, or they do not like to think or recall certain facts, or they lie. The advantage of the survey method is that the investigator can acquire directly about what he is interested in without waiting for the response to occur naturally. And he can also assess causes of behavior by asking for reasons behind the responses obtained. And he can accumulate a large number of observations in a short time. When the survey method works well, it can be surprisingly informative. As in election forecast or consumer surveys, the trick is to overcome all the factors that prevent the methods from working well. Subjects may purposely lie to the investigator to appear bright, normal, or good, and the subject gives what he thinks is a truthful response, but is actually a defense against the truth. And modern survey methods have been devised to counteract inaccuracies. We also have this statistical approach. There is a need for summarizing observation by means of a calculated number called an index number of average or average. An average or norm is the simplest statistical application. How old should a child be when he starts to talk? Or the average or norm will tell us completed observations show that a 1-year-old average few words, the meaning of which he does not understand, while a 1.5 child average uses words correctly. By age 2, the average child can use sentences and ask an average of 60 words a day. It's like an average. And also we have this experimental method. This experimental method, or generally the laboratory setting, this is generally considered the highest form of scientific method. This is a research strategy in which the investigator introduces some changes in an individual's environment and then measures the effect of those changes on his behavior in conducting a laboratory experiment to test a hypothesis. The investigator brings the participants together in a controlled environment, exposes them to different treatments, and records as data their responses to the treatment. The treatments to which he exposes the participants represent the independent variable of experiment. The reactions to the treatments become our data and or dependent variable. The experimenter controls all factors affecting dependent variables so as to establish the causal relationship between independent and dependent variables. In the experimental method, aspect of things can be consistently discriminated, and those that take different values are called variables. Independent variables are those deliberately manipulated by the experimenter, and dependent variables comprise the data of the experiment. Control variables are those held constant in some way by the experimenter so that their effects do not bias the results and lead to erroneous conclusion. An experiment permits us to test a suspected relationship between events or factors by manipulating the first and observing the effect of that manipulation upon the second. There are two groups we have to consider in the experimental method. These are the experimental group and the control group. The experimental group is composed of those people who receive the experimental treatment involved, while the control group is composed of those subjects who do not. Now, since we are in the field of psychology, we will discuss the different fields of psychology. So first, we have the physiological psychology. It deals with the biological factors that help shape human nature. It studies the relation between human behavior and the sense organs, nervous systems, muscles, and glands. The developmental psychology is a scientific study of how individuals change over time and the factors that produce these changes. It studies behavior from prenatal to senescence or old age. There's also this differential psychology. This concentrates on the differences between individuals in abilities and in physical and mental makeup. It is also concerned with the extent to which differences are inborn or acquired and how they can be changed by special training. We also have this educational psychology. This uses psychological approaches and methods in dealing with education from the kindergarten through college. It applies widely the psychology of learning and memory and of the thought processes. The abnormal psychology concentrates on the study of behavior disorders. The study includes abnormalities of perception, emotion, and memory. Neurotic behavior such as hysteria and compulsion, and psychosis such as schizophrenic and manic depressive disorders. The clinical psychology deals with the diagnosis and treatment of mental deficiency and mental disorders. In this field, psychiatrists and clinical psychologists apply what they have learned in their study of abnormal psychology. The psychiatrist is a doctor of medicine and can thus use medical as well as psychological procedures. A clinical psychologist is a PhD in psychology who uses only psychological procedures such as administration of tests and practice of therapy. The industrial psychology applies psychological techniques and data to factory and office work. It deals with job training methods, fatigue reduction, efficient work procedures, worker motivation, morale, and the selection of workers, and advertising and selling. We also has this social psychology, and this examines individuals' attitudes and personality development by living in groups such as the family, neighborhood, and the nation. This also includes the study of crowds, audiences, nations, and races. The vocational psychology, this helps an individual decide what sort of life work he should choose. It attempts to discover aptitudes for particular studies or occupation. There's also a famous legal psychology, or sometimes called forensic psychology. This deals with the different factors involved in crime and delinquency. It also studies the different testimonies given by criminals, delinquents, and witnesses. Well, human relations is different from industrial psychology. Human relations involves the maintenance of harmonious relations among people and the factors that help shape such relation. Well, the mental hygiene studies various methods of caring for the mind to avoid becoming mentally disturbed. This is more of a prevention rather than a cure. And we also have this engineering psychology. This implies that work management and human factors are closely related fields brought into being by automation and the space age. The objective is to design equipment which will be best adapted to human requirements. And there's more: forensic psychology, Filipino psychology, and environmental psychology. Finally, let's talk about psychology and other sciences. There are a lot of psychology together with other sciences. Let's start with psychology and sociology. Sociology studies all important forms of human behavior. It considers all traits of human nature and looks for rational as well as irrational reasons for group conduct. It uses the findings of psychology to help understand the operations of the mind. Sociology deals with the study of human society, its origin, evolution, and development. It deals also with the civilization, the laws governing human institutions and functions. It is interested with problems of society such as juvenile delinquency, crime, divorce, family planning, abortion, unemployment, and others. And both psychology and sociology are focused on behaviors of individuals. But sociology is more interested in group behavior. The psychology and history, where history is a chronological record of significant events, usually with an explanation of their causes. Nothing is more fascinating than the true story of how people lived in the past, their houses, food and clothing, how they cultivated their fields, manufactured goods, and traded with their neighbors, their beliefs about God and the world of nature, the laws and manner of government, the songs and the poets, and the poems, and the beautiful things the artists made. History uses the findings of psychology to explain why people behave in a certain way in the past, but change through the years. Then we also have the psychology and economics. Well, economics focuses on the money system of a country and suggests laws to improve the use and control of money and credit. It studies production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. It uses the principles of psychology to explain how human beings and their behavior affect these processes, the law of supply and demand. And then we also have the psychology and computer science. Computer science deals with computers, which are highly complex electronic devices widely employed in data processing. Computer handles the tremendous paperwork of industry, commerce, and government. Computer can do or govern practically any task that can be described mathematically, and computer scientists make use of the principles of psychology to help people realize that efficiency of computer will raise man's standard of living and to eradicate fears that the machines might dehumanize and robotize them. We also have this psychology and physiology. Well, physiological psychology is different from if you would look at them as a different science. Physiology is a science that deals with the study of the structure and functions of the body system and organs. And behavior, which is the main concern of psychology, depends a lot on the body systems and organs. We also have the psychology and biology. And we also have this thing called biological psychology, but it's different. Psychology has much in common with biology, the science of living things. And psychologists have a special interest in the brain and the rest of the nervous system, as well as the glands and the other organs. Their interest, however, stems only on the fact that biology helps to explain behavior. I think that wraps up our introduction to psychology discussion. Thank you for watching. I'm not requiring, but I hope you would subscribe for more lecture video presentations in the future. Thank you, everyone.